You know, this is water. But have you found that in your life? Where you were doing really good. You had mustered up the faith to do whatever God had asked you to do. Maybe He was asking you to go in a different direction. Maybe it was to go and do a different job. Maybe it was to start a family. Maybe it was a spouse that He was leading you to marry. Whatever it was, it would be something that would take a lot of faith to step out and do. And then just as you got a little confident and you started walking along that way, life hit. Something hit. The storm started coming in. You got distracted, and your focus strayed from God. So what happened? When you turned your eyes away from God and you quit praying and you quit going to Him and asking for His guidance and you quit seeking His help, how did that work for you? Have you felt this way before? Are you in over your head? Or have you ever had a time where you felt like you were in and over your head? Or maybe you just lived there. For some of us, if you're going, no, I don't think so, it's because you're still there. Right? What happens when you're in over your head? Where does your nose usually go? Right? To get that breath. But when you do that, where do your eyes go? Up. That is a really good reminder. This story is so interesting. We've heard this story probably 100 times, and it's real easy to check out on that one when you go, oh, we know, Peter walked on water. But there's so much more to it than just that. We've been doing The Chosen, and for those of you, oh gosh, I still implore you, please watch it. Especially if you don't watch anything else but the 8th episode of season 3, you don't even need to have the backstory. You'll figure it out. Jesus has just got through feeding the 5,000. This is actually huge because there's so much stuff going on in that one, just a couple day or two, depending on which gospel you read. This is right after Jesus had come back into Galilee. He was headed to Jairus' house. He got sidetracked by a lady with a flow of blood who needed to be healed, who reached out and touched the hem of his garment, which delayed him. Jairus' daughter dies. He says, have faith. He goes to his house, rises her from the dead, raises her from the dead. And then, after that, he goes out, and this is where he feeds the 5,000. The multitudes just keep coming. And so he does this whole huge impromptu sermon, and then he does the miraculous. He takes 5 loaves and 2 fish. And he feeds everybody with plenty left over, right? And it says, when we get to this part of the scripture, he says, right after he fed the multitudes and he sent them away, he went up on the mountain to pray, and he sent his disciples in a boat to go to the other side of the lake. Now, one would say, how else would he gotten over there if he sent the disciples on ahead? He already knew what he was going to do. There's a couple of little extra tidbits in here that you may not know. So while he's up praying on the mountain, on the hill, the disciples are in the boat and they go across the sea. Now this is the Sea of Galilee. This is where the disciples would have left and gone east. You can see the other side. It's called a sea, but it's a big lake, basically. But the difference is, it is huge. The depth. It is unbelievable. And the way the wind comes through with that terrain, they get these squalls that just come up out of nowhere. And I mean the storms that just are a flash like that are extremely scary. You can have anywhere from 12 to 20-foot waves start going. And I mean, if you're out there in a boat, oh, that's about the scariest thing that you could be in. Plus, there was all the superstition. They believed in sea monsters. That's why you didn't go past the middle of the lake. See, when James and John and Peter and them, they fished this lake, they never went past the middle. They always stayed closer to the shoreline because of sea monsters. They also believed in ghosts. That actually, they were very superstitious. Jesus brings that into play. There's also something else, a little tidbit that most people don't know. See, on the other side of this lake here, the sea, is Decapolis. That was the 10 cities that we've been talking about. And over there, they did not believe in God. They believed in all these other gods. And their gods, they said, even though they never saw them, could walk on water. They were God of the water. So what does Jesus do? He sends the disciples out on a boat to go across the lake, which they're already not happy about. And what should happen? But a huge storm, which they're like, I told you that's why we do go out here. They're in the middle of the lake. They're going nowhere. They're rowing like crazy. If you read Mark or you read John, it's in those two accounts of the gospel. They give more of the story. And they're rowing and gaining no ground, just barely staying afloat. And then Jesus, and he left them out there all night. If you look at, I think it's Mark, that says it wasn't until the morning, almost morning, that he starts to come across. And about the time, if you can imagine the lightning and the thunder and the rain, and they catch this figure, what was their first thought? It's a ghost! They're freaking out! And then Jesus says, do not be afraid. It's me. Now it's Peter. Through this whole thing, and this is the one through John, you can read it up there if you want. But it's Peter who looks out and he sees him. And while the other disciples are going crazy saying it's a ghost, he says, if it is you, he doesn't say, I know it's you. He says, if it's you, command me to come out to you. And Jesus says, plain and simple, come. With that command, Peter, he gets up, right? And he's going to go out of the boat. Now, if you were the other disciples, just picture yourselves at this moment, right? You're in this boat, you've been there all night long, everything's going south. You're still not convinced that that's Jesus because somebody's walking on the water and you have to realize that had never happened before. They were seeing it in real time for the first time. And yet you have Peter saying, I'm going to go walk out on the water. They're going, no, they're trying to pull him back in the boat, trying to keep him there. They think they're keeping him safe. Peter puts his faith in action. He climbs out of the boat and on to the water. Can you even imagine this? I mean, this has to be completely surreal. Can you imagine if you were Peter and you had just stepped out of the boat, crazy or not, and you find yourself standing on the water? That is, I won't say for sure because I don't remember, but I remember it's really, really, really deep right there. In a horrible storm. And as long as he's watching Jesus, he's literally walking out to him. But something happens. Not that his faith wavers. He hears the wind, or maybe there was a big flash of lightning, or a big boom of thunder, something pretty scary. And he takes his eyes off of Jesus for just that moment, just enough to see the storm that's going around. Everything. Where would your mind go? Probably be freaking out, going, what the heck did I do? Look at the storm. Probably not thinking he's walking on water anymore, just that he is scared by what's going on. And the minute he takes his focus off of Jesus, and he starts looking at what's going on, he starts to sink. You know, this was, I imagine that he gasped for breath before he went under, because that's when he cried out, Lord, save me. You know, this is water. But have you found that in your life? Where you were doing really good. You've been mustered up the faith to do whatever God had asked you to do. Maybe he was asking you to go in a different direction. Maybe it was to go and do a different job. Maybe it was to start a family. Maybe it was a spouse that he was leading you to marry. Whatever it was, it would be something that would take a lot of faith to step out and do. And then just as you got a little confident and you started walking along that way, life hit. Something hit. The storm started coming in. You got distracted, and your focus strayed from God. So what happened? When you turned your eyes away from God and you quit praying and you quit going to Him and asking for His guidance and you quit seeking His help, how did that work for you? Well, for me personally, I know it doesn't work well. You start to sink. And you get to the point where all you can do is look up and say, Lord, save me! Put me back in the right direction! Move me where you want me to go. When I was talking during the children's sermon, I think that happens to a lot of us. It was interesting that he admitted that even kids can do that. Have you done that? You've been walking, you're going there, you have a destination in mind, and you're walking and your mind's thinking about 150 other things, and then pretty soon you're like, wait a minute, where am I at? And then, if you were really thinking hard, you're like, where was I even headed? Don't even remember. Who's been in the car and started driving and realized that you now hit Giltner and you like totally missed the Aurora exit? I'll blame those semis on the other side, but it's happened a lot, right? We get to thinking about so much stuff. And when we do that, we can become so disoriented. We forget not only where we're at, but where we were headed. That is, I think, one of the most poignant reminders. And I love this picture because Christ did not just stand there and go, oh man, another bites the dust. I thought I had my guy. Thought I had him. No. He reaches down. Grabs Peter by the arm, by the hand, and he pulls him up. And then he says to him, he says, you of little faith. I gotta ask the question, was this really a rebuke or was this an encouragement? Because what was Jesus just talking about on the mountain before they left to get into the boat? He said to them, if you have just as much faith as a grain of mustard seed. How little is that? Teeny, teeny, tiny. Very, very little. He says, if you just have that much faith, you can say to this mountain, be moved, and it'll be moved. I think Peter had way more faith in that little bitty mustard seed when he decided to step out of the boat. That took a lot of faith. I almost think that in this interaction, because this isn't Peter who wrote the story, I think he was telling Peter, do you see? With just a little bit of faith, you were walking on water until you took your eyes off of me, until you got distracted. If you can do that with a little bit of faith, what can you do with a lot of faith? That, I think, is a major lesson. Jesus knows he's got big plans for Peter later on, even though Peter doesn't know it. He's saying you're going to need, even if you just have this little bit of faith, when the world starts crashing down on you as you are preaching the gospel, nothing is impossible. Even the water is not impossible. Now, what about the other disciples who were sitting in the boat? Who do you relate to more? Are you the kind of Peter person that you're like, yes, I would have gone out on the water. I would have gone towards Jesus. Or you're like, ooh, I would have been the other one sitting in the boat. Going, get back in here. What do you think you're doing? They had zero faith at that point. So to chastise Peter for little faith, he had little faith. He could move mountains. So my question to you is, if life circumstances are pulling you, maybe you're feeling that today. Is it pulling you down below the water? Are you having a hard time breathing? just comes up and smacks you upside the head and you go, I didn't see that coming. When the storms come up out of nowhere and the waves are so big that they look impossible, there's no way you can survive. Jesus says, keep your focus on me. All you have to do is just reach out. Reach out. Don't look down. Look up. He says, I'll never let you go. This is probably one of the most powerful things I have ever seen that in this episode 8, because it is at a time when Jesus is working with Peter, and Peter's struggling with a lot of stuff. And it's not just the water. He's struggling with life. And he says, don't let me go. Don't let me go. And Jesus says, I will never let you go. There's going to come a time after his death and resurrection that Peter's going to be by himself again. There's going to be a time when he is going to be martyred for sharing the gospel. And I'm sure it's at those times that he heard Jesus say, I will never let you go. I will never let you go. Last night as I was thinking about this message a little more, I thought of a song that I used to do when I was younger. And I absolutely loved it. I thought it was just perfect for the end of this message. It's called Till the Storm Passes By. Take a moment of silence before we start the prayer. If you would bow your heads with me. Dear gracious Lord, we come before you today. Our hearts may be really heavy. Maybe we've been blinded by the storm so long we can't even look up. Maybe we are having such a hard time even finding you through the dark. Maybe we become so distracted that we find ourselves slipping beneath the sea. Thank you for knowing that we all will be there at some point or another. That life will get to be too much and we cannot do it on our own, and you allow us to have those times so that way we have to look up to you. That way we have no other choice but to seek your face. Thank you for reminding us that nothing is impossible with you. In just an extremely short span, you healed, you raised from the dead, you fed the multitude with almost nothing. You walked on water. You allowed Peter to walk on water. And with just a word, you calmed the storm. We forget just how powerful you are. That even the winds and the sea and the trouble of this world bow down to you and listen to your voice. Thank you for reminding us that there is no situation that we can find ourselves in that you cannot reach down, grab a hold of our hands, and save us. We thank you for that saving grace. Thank you for the blood that was shed so that way we could be reunited with you.